My son tried to have me committed to a nursing home, so I cut him out of my will and left everything to charity. I'm 73 years old and never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we are. Last month, my own flesh and blood tried to ship me off to some facility against my will, and now I'm sitting here with legal documents that would make his head spin if he knew what I'd done. The whole mess started about 6 months ago when I had what the doctors called a minor stroke. Nothing too serious, just made me forget a few words here and there for a couple weeks. My left hand got a little shaky, but hell, I've been dealing with arthritis for years anyway. The doctors said I was recovering well, physical therapy was going great, and I was back to driving within a month. But my son, he saw dollar signs the moment I stumbled over the word refrigerator during one of our phone calls. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head when he came to visit me that weekend. He walked around my house like he was appraising it, picking up my wife's old china and asking if I still used it. Made some comment about how big the place was for just one person. I should mention that my wife passed away 3 years ago, and yes, the house feels empty sometimes. But it's our house, filled with 45 years of memories. Every creaky floorboard, every stain on the carpet from when the kids were little, every photo on the mantel tells a story. The idea of leaving it behind made my stomach turn. My son kept pushing, though. He'd call me every few days with these articles he'd found online about seniors living alone and the dangers involved. Started showing up unannounced to check on me, which I thought was sweet at first. But then I realized he was looking for evidence of decline, hunting for signs that I couldn't take care of myself. The breaking point came when I fell off my stepladder while changing a light bulb in the kitchen. It was a stupid accident, the kind that could happen to anyone. I twisted my ankle pretty bad and had to call for help because I couldn't put weight on it. Instead of calling me directly, the neighbor called my son first. He showed up at the emergency room with a folder full of brochures for assisted living facilities. Can you believe that? I'm lying there with my ankle wrapped up, and he's talking to the nurse about my declining mental state and how I'm becoming a danger to myself. The nurse looked at him like he was crazy because I was sitting right there, completely coherent, and telling her exactly what happened. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong with this picture. My son wasn't concerned about my well-being. He was concerned about what would happen to his inheritance if I spent it all on in-home care or medical bills. The realization hit me like a truck, and I felt this cold anger settling in my chest. Over the next few weeks, he ramped up his campaign to get me declared incompetent. He started calling my doctor's office, trying to get information about my medical records. He contacted a lawyer about guardianship proceedings. He even went to my bank and tried to get them to freeze my accounts, claiming I was suffering from dementia. The bank manager, thankfully, called me directly to verify these claims. She'd known me for over 20 years and could tell I was sharp as ever. But the fact that my own son was going behind my back like this made me sick to my stomach. I spent sleepless nights wondering where I'd gone wrong as a father. The final straw came when he showed up at my house with 2 people from some adult protective services organization. He'd filed a complaint claiming I was neglecting myself and living in dangerous conditions. These poor people had to waste their time coming to investigate a perfectly maintained home where I was clearly taking excellent care of myself. I answered all their questions, showed them around the house, proved I was managing my medications correctly and keeping up with all my appointments. They seemed embarrassed to even be there, especially when they realized what was really going on. Before they left, one of them quietly suggested I might want to get some legal advice about protecting myself. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and really thought about my situation. My son had always been a little money-focused, but I never imagined he'd stoop this low. I remembered all the times I'd helped him out financially over the years, the down payment on his first house, the money for his kids' college funds, the loan when his business was struggling. I realized I needed to take action to protect myself and my autonomy. The next morning, I called my attorney and set up an appointment to discuss my options. I also started documenting everything my son was doing, keeping records of his phone calls, his visits, and his attempts to undermine my independence. My lawyer was appalled when I told him what was happening. He explained that what my son was doing could be considered elder abuse and that I had every right to protect myself legally. We talked about restraining orders, but I wasn't ready to go that far yet. Instead, we focused on making sure my estate planning was bulletproof. I decided to make some changes to my will. Not out of spite, but out of a genuine belief that someone who would try to have me committed for their own financial gain didn't deserve to inherit the wealth I'd spent my entire life building. I wanted my money to go somewhere it would actually help people, not fund someone's greed. The process took about a month to complete. I had to get evaluated by multiple doctors to prove my mental competency, which was both humiliating and necessary. Every single medical professional confirmed that I was of sound mind and fully capable of making my own decisions. Meanwhile, my son kept escalating his efforts. He started showing up at my house with different family members, trying to stage interventions about my stubbornness and refusal to accept help. He brought his wife, who kept talking about how worried they all were about me. But I could see through it all now. The strangest part was how he'd changed the way he talked to me. He started using this patronizing tone, speaking slowly and loudly like I was a child. He'd repeat things multiple times and ask if I understood what he was saying. It was like he was trying to gaslight me into believing I really was losing my mind. I started avoiding his calls and limiting his visits. When he did come over, I'd have my phone ready to record our conversations. I caught him multiple times trying to trick me into saying things that could be used against me later. He'd ask confusing questions or bring up events that never happened, then act concerned when I corrected him. The breaking point came when he brought someone from a nursing home to tour my house and meet me. He'd scheduled this without my knowledge or consent, and I came home from the grocery store to find strangers in my living room discussing my care needs with my son. I was furious. I told them all to leave immediately and made it clear that I had never asked for their services. The nursing home representative looked embarrassed and left quickly, but my son stayed behind to argue with me. He accused me of being unreasonable and stubborn, said I was putting myself in danger by refusing help. That's when I told him I knew exactly what he was doing and that I wouldn't stand for it anymore. I explained that I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself and that his attempts to have me declared incompetent were not only hurtful but potentially illegal. The look on his face when he realized I was onto him was something I'll never forget. He tried to backtrack, claiming he was just worried about my safety and well-being. But it was too late. I'd already made my decision about what to do with my estate, and his behavior over the past few months had only confirmed that I was making the right choice. The next week, I finalized my new will. Instead of leaving everything to my son, I decided to split my estate between several charities that were close to my heart. The local animal shelter, where my wife used to volunteer, got a significant portion. The children's hospital, where I'd been treated for cancer years ago, got another chunk. The rest went to organizations that help seniors who actually need assistance. I also set up a trust to ensure my house would be donated to a nonprofit that helps families in transition. The idea that my home might provide shelter for people who really needed it felt right in a way that giving it to my greedy son never did. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. About 2 weeks after I'd finalized everything, I got a call from my son's wife. She was crying and apologetic, saying she'd just found out what he'd been doing. Apparently, he'd been lying to her about my condition, making her believe I was much worse off than I actually was. She told me that he'd been secretly meeting with financial advisors about managing my estate, and that he'd already started making plans for how to spend the money. He'd even looked into selling my house and had gotten estimates from real estate agents. The whole thing was planned out like I was already dead. The worst part was that he'd been telling people around town that I was suffering from dementia and that the family was struggling to cope. My neighbors had been giving me strange looks for weeks, and now I understood why. He'd been poisoning my reputation in the community to make his case for having me committed seem more legitimate. His wife promised she'd talk to him and try to make him understand how wrong his actions were. She begged me not to cut him out of my life completely, saying their kids still needed their grandfather. I appreciated her honesty, but the damage was already done. A few days later, my son showed up at my house, looking sheepish and defeated. He claimed he'd been acting out of love and concern, but his apology felt hollow. He asked if we could start over and rebuild our relationship. I told him I'd consider it, but that trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild. What he didn't know was that I'd already made my decision about the will. I wasn't going to tell him about the changes I'd made, at least not yet. I wanted to see if his behavior would genuinely change, or if he was just trying to get back in my good graces because he thought his inheritance was at stake. Over the next few months, I watched him carefully. He did make an effort to be more respectful and less controlling. He stopped bringing up nursing homes and started asking about my interests and hobbies instead. But I could tell it was forced, like he was following a script someone had given him. The real test came when I had another minor medical issue. I had to go to the hospital for some routine surgery, nothing serious, but I was curious to see how he'd react. Would he use this as another opportunity to push for assisted living, or would he actually support my independence? To my surprise, he was actually helpful and respectful during my recovery. He offered to help with groceries and housework without being pushy about it. He didn't mention nursing homes or question my ability to live alone. For a moment, I wondered if he'd genuinely changed. But then I overheard a phone conversation he was having with someone while I was resting. He was complaining about how long it was taking me to recover and how much it was costing him in time and gas money to check on me. He mentioned that he was playing the long game and that he needed to be patient. That's when I realized his change in behavior was just another manipulation tactic. He was still focused on the money, he'd just gotten better at hiding it. The anger I'd felt before came rushing back, but this time it was mixed with a deep sadness about what our relationship had become. I decided it was time to tell him about the changes I'd made to my will. I wanted to see his reaction and give him a chance to understand the consequences of his actions. I called him over for dinner and prepared to have one of the most difficult conversations of my life. When I told him that I'd removed him from my will and left everything to charity, his face went through a range of emotions. First shock, then anger, then what looked like genuine hurt. He accused me of being cruel and vindictive, said I was punishing him for caring about me. I explained that his actions over the past year had shown me that he cared more about my money than my well-being. I told him about all the documentation I had of his attempts to have me declared incompetent, his lies to family and friends, and his secret meetings with financial advisors. He tried to defend himself, claiming everything he'd done was out of love and concern. But when I asked him to explain why he'd been meeting with real estate agents about selling my house, he couldn't give me a straight answer. The truth was written all over his face. The conversation ended with him storming out of my house, shouting that I was a stubborn old fool who deserved to die alone. Those words cut deep, but they also confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Someone who truly loved me wouldn't say something so cruel, no matter how angry they were. In the weeks that followed, I heard through family members that he was telling people I'd lost my mind and that he was considering legal action to contest the will. But my lawyer had prepared for this possibility. We had extensive documentation of my mental competency and evidence of my son's manipulative behavior. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was still trying to have me declared incompetent, even after I'd already cut him out of the will. It showed that his actions were never really about my well-being. They were always about controlling me and my money. Some family members tried to intervene, suggesting that I was being too harsh and that I should give him another chance. But they hadn't witnessed the months of psychological manipulation and attempted financial abuse. They hadn't seen the coldness in his eyes when he talked about my future like I was already gone. I started focusing on building relationships with the charities I'd chosen to support. I visited the animal shelter regularly, getting to know the staff and volunteers. I spent time at the children's hospital, reading to kids who were stuck there for long treatments. These experiences reminded me why I'd made the decision I had. The people at these organizations were genuinely grateful for my support and didn't see me as a burden or a source of income. They valued my time and energy, not just my money. Being around them helped heal some of the wounds my son had inflicted on my heart. About 6 months after our final confrontation, I got a call from my son's wife again. She told me that he'd been struggling with depression and had finally admitted to a counselor that he'd been wrong about how he'd treated me. She asked if I'd consider meeting with him to discuss reconciliation. I agreed to meet, but only in a neutral location with my lawyer present. I wanted to hear what he had to say, but I also wanted to protect myself from any more manipulation. When we met, he looked like he'd aged years in the past few months. He apologized more sincerely than he ever had before, acknowledging that his actions had been driven by greed and impatience rather than concern for my well-being. He admitted that he'd been counting on his inheritance to solve some financial problems he'd been hiding from the family. I appreciated his honesty, but I also told him that apologies couldn't undo the damage he'd done to our relationship. I explained that trust was like a piece of paper. Once you crumple it up, you can flatten it out, but it's never quite the same again. He asked if there was any way to earn back his place in my will, and I told him that wasn't the point anymore. The money was going to places where it could do real good in the world, and I was at peace with that decision. If he wanted to rebuild our relationship, it would have to be for its own sake, not for financial gain. We left that meeting with an understanding that we could try to have a relationship again, but it would be different from before. I would never again trust him with information about my finances or my health decisions. Our interactions would be limited and supervised, at least for the foreseeable future. In the months since then, we've had a few awkward dinners and stilted phone conversations. He's been respectful and hasn't brought up money or nursing homes, but there's a distance between us that I don't think will ever fully heal. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with what might be genuine regret, but it's hard to tell if it's real or just another performance. The hardest part of this whole experience has been accepting that the son I thought I raised doesn't really exist. The person who tried to have me committed is the real version of him, and the caring, concerned act was just a facade. It's a painful realization for any parent to face. But I've also discovered a strength in myself that I didn't know I had. Standing up to my son and protecting my independence has given me a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in years. I'm not just a victim of his manipulation, I'm someone who fought back and won. I've also learned that family isn't just about blood relations. The people at the charities I support, my neighbors who check on me genuinely, and even my lawyer who helped me navigate this mess have shown me more care and respect than my own son did during his attempted power grab. My health has remained stable throughout this ordeal, which is ironic considering how much my son claimed to be worried about my well-being. I'm still living independently, still driving, still making my own decisions. The stroke that started this whole mess turned out to be a minor setback, not the beginning of the end. Looking back, I think my son's behavior was partly triggered by his own fears about aging and mortality. Seeing me have a stroke forced him to confront the reality that I won't be around forever, and instead of dealing with that grief in a healthy way, he turned it into a financial planning opportunity. I understand that watching your parents age can be scary and difficult. I remember feeling helpless when my own father started declining. But the difference is that I focused on what would make him happy and comfortable, not on what would be most convenient or profitable for me. The legal documents are all finalized now, and I've made sure they're ironclad. My lawyer has prepared for every possible challenge my son might make, though I hope it won't come to that. I've also prepared detailed explanations of my decisions for the probate court, in case anyone questions my mental state after I'm gone. I've told the charity representatives about the situation, so they're prepared for potential challenges to the will. They've been incredibly supportive and understanding, which reinforces my belief that I made the right choice. These organizations will use my money to help people who genuinely need it, not to fund someone's lifestyle. Some nights I lie awake wondering if I've been too harsh, if I should have given my son more chances to change. But then I remember the coldness in his voice when he talked about having me committed, and I know I made the right decision. You can't build a relationship on manipulation and greed. I've started writing letters to my grandchildren, explaining my decisions and hoping they'll understand when they're older. I don't want them to think I'm a bitter old man who cut their father out of spite. I want them to know that sometimes you have to protect yourself from the people who are supposed to love you most. The house feels different now that I know it will eventually help other families. Every room holds memories of the life my wife and I built together, and soon it will help create new memories for people who need a fresh start. There's something beautiful about that continuity. I've also started volunteering more regularly at the organizations that will benefit from my estate. It's given me a sense of purpose and connection that I was missing after my wife died. These people see me as a valuable contributor, not as a burden to be managed. My son still calls occasionally, usually on holidays or special occasions. Our conversations are polite but distant, like we're acquaintances rather than family. He updates me on his kids' activities and asks about my health, but there's no real warmth between us anymore. I sometimes wonder if he's genuinely changed, or if he's still hoping I'll change my mind about the will. His behavior has been appropriate since our confrontation, but I can't shake the feeling that he's just biding his time. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully repair. The most surprising part of this whole experience has been how much lighter I feel now that I'm not worried about protecting my assets from my own son. I can focus on enjoying my remaining years instead of constantly looking over my shoulder for the next attempt to undermine my independence. I've made peace with the fact that I'll probably die with a strained relationship with my son. It's not the ending I would have chosen for our story, but it's the ending his actions created. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest, and we have to protect ourselves even from them. The charities I've chosen to support have become like a second family to me. They include me in their events, ask for my input on programs, and treat me like a valued member of their community. It's shown me that meaningful relationships can develop at any age, even after experiencing betrayal. I hope that someday my son will understand why I made the choices I did. I hope he'll see that protecting my independence wasn't about being stubborn or difficult. It was about maintaining my dignity and autonomy in my final years. And I hope he'll learn from this experience and treat others with more respect and genuine care. But even if he never understands, I'm at peace with my decisions. I've used my resources to protect myself and to help others, and that feels like a worthwhile legacy. The money I've left to charity will outlive both of us and continue helping people long after this family drama is forgotten. Sometimes I think about what my wife would say about all this. She always saw the best in people and might have encouraged me to be more forgiving. But she also had a strong sense of justice and wouldn't have tolerated anyone trying to take advantage of me. I think she would have supported my decision to protect myself. The legal protections I've put in place have given me peace of mind that I can live out my remaining years without fear of being forced into a situation against my will. My son's attempt to have me committed backfired spectacularly, and now he has no legal standing to make decisions about my care or my property. I've also learned valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and protecting myself from it. The signs were there earlier, but I ignored them because I wanted to believe my son had my best interests at heart. Now I know better, and I'm more cautious about who I trust with sensitive information. The documentation I kept during my son's campaign against me has been invaluable. It's helped my lawyer build a strong case for why I made the decisions I did, and it's protected me from accusations of acting irrationally or incompetently. I encourage other seniors to keep similar records if they suspect someone is trying to take advantage of them. Looking toward the future, I feel hopeful about the impact my estate will have. The animal shelter will be able to expand their programs and help more pets find homes. The children's hospital will be able to provide better care and support for young patients and their families. The other organizations will be able to continue their important work helping people in need. My son lost out on a significant inheritance, but the community gained resources that will help vulnerable populations for years to come. That trade-off feels right to me, even though it came at the cost of my relationship with my child. I've also started thinking about what other changes I want to make in my remaining years. I'm considering traveling to places my wife and I always talked about visiting but never got around to. I want to create new memories and experiences while I still can. The strength I found in standing up to my son has inspired me to be more assertive in other areas of my life too. I'm speaking up more in social situations, expressing my opinions more freely, and not letting people dismiss me because of my age. It's been liberating to embrace that confidence. In the end, this whole experience has taught me that protecting yourself isn't selfish or cruel, it's necessary. Nobody has the right to control your life or your decisions, regardless of their relationship to you. My son learned that lesson the hard way, and I hope other people can learn from our story without having to go through the same pain. The will is final, the legal protections are in place, and I'm living my life on my own terms. That's all any of us can really ask for, and it's what I'll continue to fight for as long as I'm able. Sometimes standing up for yourself means disappointing the people you love most, but it's still the right thing to do. My son tried to have me committed to a nursing home, so I cut him out of my will and left everything to charity. It wasn't the outcome either of us expected when this started, but it's the outcome his actions created. And despite everything that's happened, I'm grateful for the strength I found to protect myself and the peace I've found in my decision.